Hello, everybody. I am really excited for this panel. We are actually welcoming back two Measure of Music alumni. We're welcoming back Brittany Forman for the second time, as well as our new speakers, Dario Slavazza and Andrew Ullah. And they are going to be joining, Marc Brown is going to be their moderator to moderate this panel. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Marc Brown up to the stage to introduce his panelists.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Christine. It's brilliant to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I'm welcome to the panel, which is Music Curation, Rights, and Royalties, which we were just figuring out behind the scenes what we're going to discuss. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce myself, and then I'm going to get everybody else to introduce themselves, and then we'll jump right into it. So my name is Marc Brown. I live in London, Stockholm, Sweden. And I'm the founder of Byta, which is a platform for sending and receiving digital audio. Brittany, I discuss ID3 tags a lot, but we're not going to discuss them today. Basically, so we were having a joke earlier about data, and my data is not Brittany's data. So we're gonna define that in a second. But one of the big things we do is we have another side to our business, which is called How We Listen. And it's about delivering knowledge to people who work in and around music, be it artists or managers or anything like that. And we talk a lot about music discovery, because the way the media likes to talk about music discovery or streaming platforms, all you do is throw your music up on Spotify or Apple Music, and then people listen to it and you get paid. And yeah, Brittany's laughing. So we all know that that's not the case. And the way the world is today, there's tons of different ways to discover music. And that means there's tons of different ways to get paid. And so the three people I have here today are experts in those kind of areas. And that's sort of what we're going to discuss. We're going to discuss discovery, ownership, and maybe the journey between discovery and ownership. So I've got Dario to my right, and why don't you introduce yourself first, because I think they make sense because you're more on the curation front. So tell us a bit about what you do, where you work, and how you ended up doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, totally. So I'm the head of curation at Feed Media Group. I run our curation department that's, running the strategy, the tools that we're using, how we're helping customers, or general overall, approach to curation and the tools that we use in our back end. Feed Media Group is a B2B company that serves fitness, retail, various spaces for streaming. Curation is one of those pillars, but the actual delivery to streaming and the paying of royalties is the third part of that pillar. So sort of an all-encompassing tool for companies to use. And I fell into this. I have a degree in ethnomusicology, and so I've worked in music, in the industry, in studios, doing live production as a saxophone player for years. But curation sort of gets back to the heart for me of ethnomusicology, in the sense of understanding music, culture, why people love what they love, and how they engage and listen with it.
Okay, perfect. And I'll keep going clockwise based on who's on my screen. So Brittany.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, my name is Brittany Forman. I am head of data strategy and digital operations at Exceleration Music, and we partner with indie labels to make sure that they're getting the most out of the digital age. And so my day-to-day is generally not only ingesting a lot of the catalogs that we're onboarding and making sure that the rights are correct, who is going to be paid is all laid out, but then also on the digital operations side, making sure it's getting to the streaming platforms, making sure that it's tagged correctly. So it's it's very data heavy. Which is interesting because, like Dario, this is not what my degree is in. I kind of fell into it as well.
What's your degree in then? What's your degree in?
Marketing.
All right, cool. Okay, fair enough. So that's not completely crazy.
It's not completely crazy, but I just really like being right, which is how I fell into data. because that kind of gives you the moral standard. I know because I looked at the data. I'm real obnoxious that way. So I really love to dig into the data so I can solve the problems and be the hero, be like, I found the answer. My day-to-day is just kind of like cleaning data, and it's very cathartic for me.
Excellent. Okay, Andrew, over in the bottom left-hand corner, tell us a bit about yourself, how you got to where you work now and what Leftbrain does.
Sure. So my name is Andrew. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. I head up royalties at Leftbrain. And what we do is we make sure that there's no gaps in administration. So designing technology that spots errors in metadata administration. So I'm first and foremost a songwriter myself. So I got started in royalties because I was curious how people were paid within the music space. And I wanted to know more about it and decided, why not go see what it's all about, and start my career in payments, and then figured out that it takes upwards of 1.5 years to pay songwriters. So I was like, this seems like an issue. I want to help my fellow music creators. And so I joined Leftbrain about 2 years ago to help design processes to collect on royalties to make sure there's no gaps.
Excellent. Okay, so what we were just discussing before we popped in here was this idea that, so if Dario is up at the discovery point, Andrew would be fully on the ownership side, making sure people get paid, and Brittany would be in the middle. Does everybody sort of agree with that situation? So I think, why don't we start up top with discovery and maybe discuss, I guess, do we want to define what we're talking about when we're talking about data? I think, Brittany, why don't you, because this came up as well 2 minutes ago. So tell us what kind of data let's just do a quick round here. Brittany, what kind of data do you work with? Just so we're all on the same page.
So for our data strategy side, we're dealing with like ownership and kind of like all of the metadata of the song itself. So the titles, who was on it, engineers, the publishers, etc. So who do we need to make sure it gets paid at the end of it? So, and also the reversions and how long the ownerships and licenses last. And then on the digital operation side, it's all of the making sure that it gets to the platform. So we need to know the length of the song, like the BPM, the tracking, tagging, all of that stuff. So they're two different sides, but they serve one purpose, to make sure that there's discovery, but also there's royalties at the end of the day, because we want both of those things. That's how our creators get paid.
Yeah, we need to make both Dario and Andrew happy at the same time. Okay, so Andrew, you work at the rights end. So what when you think about data, what do you think most about?
I think about the exploitation rights that are corresponding to the actual copyrights themselves. So there are 6 exploitation rights per copyright. So when I'm talking about data, I'm talking about ownership data and what needs to be registered at the various royalty sources in order to get paid.
Okay, perfect. And if anybody has any questions, throw them in the chat and hopefully we can get to them, because some of this stuff gets a little confusing for people who aren't super experienced. But then, so Dario, let's come to you last, but then also sort of start the conversation around discovery. So when you think about data, what are the things that you work with in your job? Like when I say, what are the big data issues for you, what do you think of?
I think about the things that are actually about the music, right?
Okay.
Because all of these things, the songwriter, the artist, the song title are all important, for searching in that sense. But if I don't know anything about the music, right, from the BPM to the intensity, depending on the context, the key, all of these things, these characteristics about the music, if I don't have those markers, then it's just like I'm looking at a bucket of music and it's all sort of the same. And the odds of me being able to pick out what I need and to find it effectively is, it's limited in that sense. And so it limits how I'm able to discover something, as opposed to if I have that information, those sort of characteristic markers, right? About, is it fast? Is it slow? Is it aggressive? Is it, all of these sort of adjectives that get applied to the music.
So, like, just to put this in a context for say an artist, so you curate playlists for fitness is one of the things you do, right? Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
So does that mean that you sort things by BPM? That, like, if you were going to have music go on.
If it's a cycling class, yeah. If cadence and tempo is important, right? For a cycling class, rowing, right? For running, for these things which, you know, a lot of fitness is based around, then yes, BPM's so important, right? Because for that portion of the workout, I need to get to a certain cadence, and instructors want to use the music to do that, right? Now there's other things, weightlifting, you know, yoga, stretching, other stuff where the BPM isn't important, but then the intensity and these other aspects start to creep in, and the genre and etc. But yes, BPM is for fitness in particular is very important.
And is that also something, so like if someone would think about, say, the radio, you would think, okay, well, we play this type of music on our radio station, and a lot of it's done by listening. Do you find in the way music creation today is, from your experience, it's like you need these markers such as BPM to be able to sort things much quicker? Is that a way for you to do your job more effectively? Can you cover more ground? Does that make sense?
Yeah, cover more ground and cover more ground over scale. I need to know this information eventually, right? If someone wants to do a cycling workout to a song, I need to know what the BPM is. Like that's just it's going to happen at some point, right? And I may start with the song, right, and then work my way this way, or start with the BPM and work my way back that way. But it's critical to that, and from a listening standpoint, I could do it by listening, right, and I could do it by using a tap tempo and going through and listening. But I'm only one person, right? I can only discover so much music that way, as opposed to looking at it from a functional perspective of, okay, I need something that fills this sort of space, right? Any music supervisor going through a music production library is going to do the same thing, right? They need something spooky. They may know spooky things, and a good curator or supervisor does have a huge internal library, but even still using those markers to sort of point you, or it's like in a grocery store, you know what food is and you know where all those things are, but having the aisles and the markers still just at least points you in the right direction, so you're not just aimlessly wandering around a grocery store for hours looking for soy sauce.
Yeah. So, and I guess I need to ask, because I think the key with any discussion is, like, what are the things can you think of anything that you see the most as far as what's missing? Because I think what's important is that people who are involved in this call always should be making notes. Oh, this person's telling me that these things are always forgotten. So do you have a couple quick tips before we talk to Brittany?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges for us, there's obviously attribution, and there's something like BPM. We have internal algorithms that'll figure out what the BPM is. That's fine. I don't, it's nice if it comes with it, so I know definitively, but we'll figure it. Like, we have ways of doing that. Same with, the loudness, we can, adjust the gain of things and all that stuff. But the lyrical content, whether it's explicit or not, those sorts of things are just woefully, missing. And genre in that sense, because sometimes people get lumped into big, broad categories that aren't actually, appropriate or targeted to where they are and where their sound sits. So I feel like those sorts of things around the content, the lyrics, the genre, and then really honestly, just anything that you can think of. The more information, if it's not useful, it'll just sort of, get ignored. That's fine. But as much information as possible is really what it comes down to.
Okay. All right, cool. So, but Brittany, this all must be music to your ears. You must deal with people like Dario all the time, and your goal is to make sure that he never has any complaints for someone like you.
Yeah, everybody is happy. We all live in harmony. Data sets us free. Like, my goal is to make sure nobody has anything to come back with and be like, oh, well, this is wrong, or this isn't what I need. I think gold star days are when we get messages like, this is the most perfect data I have ever seen, which we've gotten, my team. And we were just like, everybody gets some champagne. Like, it's a good day. Like, So we want to make sure that the data is complete as possible. We want to make sure that we make curators' jobs easier, because if it's easy for our music to get discovered, all of our copyrights are then played a little bit more, and that helps all of our clients, all of our labels. So we really see it as an ecosystem, that the better the data is, the better it runs for everybody else.
Okay, and so like, what are the big areas that you find people miss? Because I'm assuming what happens is that your organization onboards new labels, and you get to put all their data under the microscope. And I'm assuming that you work with labels that are quite successful, but do you find that there are, again, like I was asking Dario, do you find that there are gaps still?
There are. I mean, it's also very wide ranging, because we have some legacy catalogs, which are almost like public domain. So, and nobody who was in those rooms is still on this plane. So you're just kind of like, okay, well, we just got to Google search it out, figure out who owns the publishing, where the underlying copyright is, so that we can get mechanical licenses. That is like the largest thing I see on the recording side, is nobody knows what an ISWC is. And I'm just like, well, we got to pay somebody, so we have to make sure it's tagged to the correct copyright. So research time. But sometimes it's lyrics. Sometimes it's ISRCs, which is, they have been issued, but we don't know which version it is. So it varies. And usually when I talk to like artists on the recording side, it's like an Excel sheet is your friend. You'll have, because at least you'll have the title, who was in the room, who the engineer is, like all of like who gets paid. Like that, it helps us like ingesting. And then we can do all the other stuff to make sure Dario's life is easier, because we can run it through algorithms. We can tag it. We can go through stuff to be like, okay, it's a happy song, it's a mood, it's a fast pace, etc. And then we can send it out to the DSPs and everybody's happy. Like, I just want to make sure, like we have checklists that we send to our teams. It's like, if you don't check the checklist, it's not done, it's not delivered. Like, if I don't have lyrics, I don't care, do it again.
I just want to say, I've done a couple workshops around metadata, label copy, and all that kind of stuff. And the amount of people that say Excel is your friend, it's like, this is a super, super complex thing, and everybody uses Excel. Like, it's like, don't over egg the pudding, just use Excel. So so coming to you, Andrew, you were nodding when Brittany was talking about trying to find who owns the copyright. Do you spend a lot of time on that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, as she mentioned, the ISRC and ISWC, there are two copyrights, and oftentimes that they're not linked, and ISWC data is very few and far between. The ISRC data is what is linked to the sound recording. So what I mean by that is it's very difficult sometimes to find A, the link, and then B, who are the owners of the actual original publishing. If it's an older songwriter or older publisher that maybe is really hard to contact, you have to get clearances for all of this stuff. So I was nodding because I feel those pains.
So maybe it would be good to just, do you want to explain the difference between an ISRC and what was it, the two of them? Could you explain the difference?
ISWC.
Yeah, thanks.
So the ISRC is it's like the fingerprint. It's the social security number. It's a singular identifier for a sound recording. No two sound recordings should have the same ISRC code, whereas you can have 1,000 songs with the same release title. The ISWC is in theory the exact same thing. It's the international shared standard of the music composition that all societies should have. So it's again like the fingerprint for the actual music composition. And the difference between the two is that one pertains to the song, the other one is the sound recording.
Okay, and so if like I'm a new artist or I'm a manager, where do I get these?
So if you are an artist or a manager and you're assigned to the label will assign the ISRC codes.
Yeah, cool.
But with the ISWC, it's dependent on the societies around the world. So here in the United States, ASCAP issues the ISWC codes.
Okay, Good, because I get confused every time. So I figure if I keep hearing about it every time and I still get confused, I think it's important that we discuss it. So Dario, I've got a question for you coming up in a second, but I wanted to ask you because you were saying earlier that your organization handles all payments for stuff. So do you ever get involved with any of this kind of stuff, or are you just purely on the creation side?
No, we have a music affairs team and they handle ingestion. I do interface with them. And so,
Yeah.
I'm aware, I know all of these things and aware of all of them. But ideally, by the time it gets to me, it has all of those things, which is, again, it's one of those things that it won't get to me and I can't even discover it if it doesn't have that information, right? I can't put it in a playlist or a station to be used if we can't pay the person. And so it's not even going to be open as an option to me. So in that sense, yes. But usually if I notice, it's because it's missing and I have to kick it back. And so the only time I care about ISRC is if it's not there. If it's there, great, wonderful. That means someone's being paid and I can use it. If not, then I go, oh, no, this is a problem. And so, again, it's like I said, the more data, the better. The more you've attached to it, then that means it's greased through the pipeline.
So Brittany, I'm going to jump to you. Like, does that happen? What Dario is explaining, does that happen a lot? Like that data gets rejected if one thing is wrong?
I mean, not on my watch, but yeah, that's very possible.
for other people who are less, less on it than you are. For mere mortals.
There's style guides and ticketing in a lot of the DSPs where if you don't give them the correct data, they're going to put a kibosh on it, be like, we can't let this go live because you're missing this. There's a conflict here. You don't have the correct thing. The feature is wrong, or it's like the syntax is incorrect for our platform. So there are a lot of ways that it will kind of it will muddle the pipeline and get stuck, and it'll get sent back to the rights holders to be like, you need to fix this before it can go live. And so we do have some tickets that we get where it's just like, oh, well, the feature was like in the wrong place. But for somebody who doesn't take as much care of their data, they're going to get far more tickets. And it means that there is now a hurdle between your music coming from the creator to getting played on the platform. And we want to lessen that friction.
Yeah. So like Andrew, I'm wondering, do you see this a lot with the clients you work with, where people show up and they're missing what you view as foundational information? Do you have to say to people, this is never going to fly with Dario's organization? We need to get this sorted out right away before we submit it?
So we work actually downstream of the processes that we're discussing. So it is after the fact of when these releases have been submitted, they've been consumed, played. And so it is us really checking to see what registrations are there, what data has been submitted correctly or not. So we can analyze it, ingest that data, reconcile it, and make sure that we outbound send the corrections so our clients get paid everything that's due to them.
Okay, well, so talk a bit more about that, because I was getting confused. So you're further down the line, and once all the data is going in, you start receiving information back to make sure it's correct. Is that
correct? And also within the actual registrations. So the data that's being submitted to the distributor, or whether it's Sound Exchange or ASCAP, it's coming in from like a myriad of sources because music is a very collaborative process. So songwriter A could submit a registration to, say, ASCAP, and that might not be correct. And so what we do with our clients is we're making sure that the catalog that we have internally that we know is correct by basing and referencing it to their agreements is properly expressed at the various royalty sources.
Okay, cool. Oh my God, it is so complicated. I think every time I know what's going on, then I get on another one of these calls and I'm like, I so don't know what's going on. So I've got a couple questions here that I want to get into. Dario, this one's for you. You mentioned artists tend to fall into broad genre categories. Given genre is so subjective, how would you go about bucketing artists into narrower, more narrow genre categories?
I mean, genre. It should be a waterfall, right? And this is how a lot of metadata is organized, right? There's a first primary genre, secondary, and it tiers down, right?
Yeah.
And you should always think about tiering down. If you just put whatever micro niche genre you are and don't level it up to something, unless I'm specifically looking for that phrase, and I'm looking for ghost rock, I'm not going to find it if that's the only piece of information attached to it, right? But if you work your way down, right? If you think jazz, right, then you think hard bop, right? And then you work your way down in the levels, then it can be found through that sort of tiering system. And I think every artist, at least conceptually, should understand that that's how the data is being organized and being sorted, and not just by, these bubbles don't exist independently of themselves. And so that's not having a genre is obviously going to get you nowhere, but just having that isolated, sort of genre that's out in the world is again going to limit you.
Okay, all right. So I've got another question here from J. Camilo Sarasas. Aside from payments, how can we use metadata to make collaborator credits more readily available for the public? Do you know any companies that do this well? This seems to come up quite a lot, that people, especially songwriters or people who work on different kind of records. Brittany, I'm assuming you see this stuff coming up a lot around people wanting to get credits for whatever they do on a record. Do any of you track that or release any of that publicly, or where do you find that information? Do you use public sources to search for info?
For info like that, I'll use essentially like SongView to kind of like see who the songwriters were, if anybody else is included in the room. Jaxa is doing a really good job of building a database because they want to make sure credit where credit is due. So that, yes, Jaxa is amazing because they'll have everybody from the engineers, the mastering engineer, and so it's like little profiles, and I think they've partnered with like the RIAA and all of these other organizations to make sure that they're the official partners. And so you can go in and claim your profile and just be like, okay, well, here's all of my credits, but they're across all different things. And because that also kind of feeds into like best engineer or like all of these awards, like there has to be a way to quantify it. And so there's data out there that people are starting to use. You have to just make sure that you are a part of that and that your voice is heard, and so that you are counted, and then also make sure your collaborators are also counted in that way as well.
So like now going back over to the payment side, like Andrew, I sort of wanted to talk to you a bit more and ask, like, again, if you're a smaller artist or a manager and you're just getting going and you've got your Excel sheet for all the metadata, like, how on earth are you supposed to keep track of all the revenue sources? Like this is so let's assume that they've got their ISRCs and their ISRCWs or whatever it is. But like, do you, because you all work in a much sort of larger operation, like I'm curious if you have any insight about what artists and newer labels or managers can do to make sure that they're getting the right information back. You remember, like we were talking about, what do you think on that kind of stuff?
Well, I think, so we have to take again a step back to the nature of the copyrights themselves. Who are you assigning what rights pertaining to your copyrights to? And from there, you can sort out who has ownership of what. So just say, for instance, I'm a recording artist and I'm also a songwriter. I've distributed through a STEM or DistroKid or whoever. So that is covering for my sound recording copyrights itself. I'm assigning them to collect on sales, on streaming. And then also there's a sound exchange piece of this all. So for the performances of non-interactive digital performance, I'm a songwriter at this point. So I'm talking about my music composition. Then who have I granted my rights to? It's the publisher, and then also to ASCAP. So between those four are the primary sources of revenue for music creators. And that's largely what we do. We're coming through each one of these primary royalty sources to make sure that there's no discrepancies. Just because you have like registrations at like all of these royalty sources does not mean that they're correct. And it really does take somebody or a technology to go through to make sure that there's no discrepancies between any of your catalog. So every single song.
Okay. So I've got a question for you from Jimmy Gatsos here. Question for Andrew. How much money are you finding is lost in royalties for your clients due to these royalty metadata errors? Is it only small artists with minimal support that are encountering these problems?
No, it's actually all across the board. So it is large artists, it is small artists. This in the music industry, we call this the black box. And every single year, the black box, and that is an estimated value of $2.5 billion that's not attributed to music creators, or it's either withheld at royalty sources or it's paid out incorrectly due to this very problem. So it affects all artists, big, small. And in terms of some use cases that we've seen, so to date, since we've launched this pilot program, we've collected about $1 million in black box royalties for our clients. One specific case that I can mention is that you have a single point of consumption for like a hit song, and you have various payments that are going out. You might be collecting on some of that, but you're not maybe collecting on the other pieces, say from ASCAP or even from your label or from your distributor. So you have to collect from a myriad of different places, but once you're familiarized with what places to collect from, you can streamline it from there.
So Jimmy, follow-up question. They're on it here. With all this data required to pay creatives correctly and the ever-increasing amount of music being published, do you see the black box increasing or decreasing? Very good question. That's a very good question. Is this going to get worse or is it going to get better?
No, it's actually getting worse. So it's getting worse because historically, if you think about it, the gatekeepers are gone now. The ability to distribute our content online is a lot easier than it's ever been. So, all four of us can sign up with DistroKid and put out an album together as an independent artist, but we might not be familiar with the whole collections and the setup. Whereas if historically you sign with a label or a publisher, hopefully that they're doing their jobs, but because there's so many more indie artists out here today that are unfamiliar with how to collect on their royalties, it's actually increasing the problem. Just some quick stats at Sound Exchange, which is collecting on Pandora satellite radio, the amount of registrations at Sound Exchange actually went down year over year, when we all know that during the pandemic, the amount of songs that were released went up dramatically. So that is an indication that this problem is not getting better, it's actually getting worse over time.
I just want to highlight that Jimmy is actually works at Measure of Music, and these questions are coming in from the live stream. So Jimmy is getting all their insights from the live stream. But Brittany, do you want to chime in on what we were just discussing? Because it's you're on mute.
No. That's the kind of the soundtrack of the pandemic. You're on mute. But the black box is my time in publishing kind of was the bane of my existence, because I had to learn how to code to AI and find all of the copyright connections. What people don't understand is the black box is only allowed to sit for a certain amount of time, and then it has to be paid out. But it gets paid out in market share. And so I think the biggest, the joke that we have on our team is that if you don't claim your royalties from black box, Drake gets that, and that's not God's plan. So you have to you have to be on top of it and to make sure that you have, again, the data correct. We were the gatekeepers. We'd get ISRCs in, and they'd have the ZZ prefix, which is essentially a sample ISRC, but only people who know the data would see that and be like, that's not a real ISRC. Nobody issued that. We have to we have to take that out of the thing, because no, we're not going to get paid on it. So we can't push it out. So there's all of these things to know, but the black box is the kind of the bane of most people's existence, because it really just represents people not getting paid. And the fact that it keeps ballooning is really disheartening, because I think all of us are in this industry because we love it, but it has to pay the bills, and it has to pay the bills for the creators. Otherwise, all of us don't have jobs. So any way that we can make this more efficient and to bring the black box down and to make sure that these payments are streamlined from like our discovery, everything from discovery to payment. Like the data is the key in making sure that there's enough data literacy among the creators, the songwriters, and the recording artists to make sure that we can all come together, know what the copyrights need to entail, so that like they're like YouTube has one of the biggest black boxes and they're owned by Google. And that just blows my mind because I was like, you literally could build something to find out where all of this goes.
And we've just had a question from Ian, who ends up benefiting from the black box. And Brittany says that it's 100% Drake. I don't know if that's true, but
it's not 100% Drake.
I'm joking. So I've got, there was another question earlier, which I think is really important, from Sarah. Do you guys recommend any outside resources, such as books or articles, to review all this information? Because I know what it's like. We're on here for 45 minutes. Lots of lingo, lots of different things, lots of different information. Do any of you have anything you want to write in the chat that people might be able to look up, or any recommendations from the three of you?
Yeah, recommendation. So the MLC was just founded. They have been a great resource with content. The way that they distill their information, not only from the perspective of collecting on your mechanical royalties for your publishing, but they also just give the lay of the land all across the board. And it's free to join the MLC. They're a resource for songwriters, for songwriters specifically, but it really has a broad scope. So one of their pushes is to really make sure that there is a amount of literacy amongst music creators today. So the MLC is a fantastic resource that is free, and they're very friendly. They pick up the phone and you can even chat with them online, which is very atypical in the music industry, I might add.
Can you throw a link in the chat, someone? Dario, I have a question for you that came in earlier, and it got lost in the shuffle here, and it's related to what you said about your background. So the question is, I also come from a background in musicology, and I'm wondering how you can transition your career to curation. I don't even know how to get out of academia more towards data or curation in the industry, and I think that's a really good point. Like, people go and they learn certain things in school, and then they're like, how do I make a change in what I actually want to do? So do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, right, the curator is such a broad, so you have to ask yourself what kind of curator you want to be, right? Do you want to be a tastemaker, right? Somebody that's in that space, because then you need to go and learn the appropriate skill sets for that, right? If you want to be a curator, a functional curator that curates for something like fitness, you know, you need to go and get those other skills around it, you know, you already have the music awareness and knowledge. And so then you need to go develop those other skills in like data and analytics, in statistics, you know, these hard functional skills that then build you out as a curator in that sense. In the same way that, right, if someone said they love to draw and they want to be an artist, well, do you want to be, a figurative artist, you know, and do still lifes and things that may or may not end up in collections? Do you want to be an architect? Do you want to be a draftsman? Like, the curation is only really the base part of that skill. And it's about really developing the other parts of yourself around that then make you functional and useful in that context from a professional standpoint. Okay,
cool. And I think we're nearly out of time. I can't believe it. This is ridiculous because there's been too many good questions. So I just want to wrap up, and I wanted to just ask you all quickly, maybe Andrew, we'll start with you, and then we'll do Brittany, and then you, Dario. Any last piece of insight that maybe we haven't discussed that you think anybody on this call, no matter what their level area of expertise is, might want to know? The thing you think you say to so many people throughout the day. Is there anything you can think of, Andrew?
Sure. At both Sound Exchange and at ASCAP, please be mindful that there is a label share and that there is a artist share. At ASCAP, BMI, or PRO, same difference, writer share and publisher share. That is a big misconception. You can't just register once for those and expect to get 100% of what suits you. There's two halves of those two coins that was set up by the government. It's a mandate. So yeah, that's my singular piece of advice and a huge misconception.
Okay, perfect. Brittany.
I think my takeaway here would be depending on which side of the recording you're on, so whether your composition or your recording, become very at least intimately aware of the data that's needed for that, and so that you can kind of be in control of your career, because we live in a digital era. So making sure that at least if you're on the recording side, you know what an ISRC is. You don't need to know how to issue them, but you need to know that your songs need them. You need to know like who the songwriter is of the song you're writing. If you are on the songwriter side, knowing the splits and who all needs to be on the split sheet. So anytime there are credits, you know everybody's accounted for. So I think it's just being aware is the start, because you have people like us who can get into the deep dive, but it's incredibly helpful having people who come in with some sort of knowledge of, okay, well, I have all this information, and I know I'm missing this. Can you help me find this? Versus here's something, figure it out. Because we love you guys, but that's really frustrating. I'm not gonna lie.
So Dario, I'll give you the last word, but you are nodding in agreement with Brittany, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was going to say is, one, as an independent artist or starting out, you're in a unique position that you actually do control the source of all of this information, right? And if you don't fill it in, somebody else is going to, right? If they're going to use it or have to, right? They're going to have to put something in there. And I think, there's a sea of music. There's so much of it. And so why wouldn't you want to put up flags and flares and anything that makes people pay attention to you, notice you, especially if you think about in the industry and from other professionals that they're inundated with this, they need to be able to see in that, wide breadth of information.
Okay, that's brilliant. And I think like the flags and flares way of explaining it is brilliant. Like that's extremely succinct. That's what you're doing. You're just firing off.
Yeah, because we're looking.
We're
gonna come.
I'm here. Yeah, I'm here.
Exactly.
And Saskia, I saw you in the chat. I wanted to say hi. We're at the same events all the time. So I just should I be passing it back to you, Christine? Thanks so much, everyone. It's too bad we didn't have enough time. I got to keep it under the line, though, Christine. I got to do my job here.
Thank you all so much, Marc. I appreciate it. Dario, Andrew, Brittany, lovely to see you all. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Great to have you two back. With that is our last live session of the day. So I'm going to talk to you guys about what's next.